Pablo Escobar, a name that resonates through the annals of history, synonymous with power, fear, and an almost mythical status. The name alone evokes fear, awe, and fascination. To some, he was a Robin Hood figure, a man who gave back to the poor. To others, he was a ruthless criminal who brought untold suffering. He was a man who rose from humble beginnings to become one of the most powerful criminals in history. Born in Rio Negro, Colombia, Escobar's early life was marked by poverty and a relentless drive to escape it. As the head of the Medellín Cartel, Escobar controlled a vast empire built on cocaine. His operations spanned continents and his influence reached the highest echelons of power. He amassed unimaginable wealth, commanded an army of loyal followers, and held a nation hostage in a grip of terror. His Hacienda Nápoles was a symbol of his opulence, complete with its own zoo and private airstrip. Even today, decades after his death, his shadow looms large. The city of Medellín, once the epicenter of his empire, still bears the scars of his reign. Escobar's story is a cautionary tale of ambition, greed, and the corrupting influence of power. His reach extended into politics, law enforcement, and everyday life, corrupting everything it touched. It's a story of violence and bloodshed, but also one of cunning, charisma, and the allure of easy money. Escobar's ability to charm and manipulate was as much a weapon as his arsenal of guns. It's a story that continues to captivate and horrify in equal measure. From documentaries to books, his life has been dissected and analyzed, yet the full extent of his impact remains a subject of debate. This is the story of Pablo Escobar, the king of cocaine, a man whose legacy is a complex tapestry of crime, power, and an indelible mark on history. Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria was born in 1949 in the small town of Rio Negro, Colombia. He grew up in the slums of Medellín, surrounded by poverty and hardship. Life in the barrio was tough, and Escobar learned to hustle from a young age. He started small, stealing tombstones and selling contraband cigarettes. These petty crimes were just a stepping stone. Escobar was ambitious and craved power. He saw an opportunity in Colombia's growing drug trade. Cocaine, a new and highly addictive drug, was gaining popularity in the United States. Escobar recognized its potential and dove headfirst into this dangerous new world. Escobar started small, buying coca paste from producers in Bolivia and Peru. He refined it into cocaine in makeshift labs hidden in the Colombian jungle. He then smuggled the cocaine into the United States, using small planes and boats to evade authorities. As his operation grew, so did his ambition and ruthlessness. Escobar was a brilliant strategist and a master manipulator. He bribed officials, threatened rivals, and built a loyal network of sicarios hired killers who enforced his will with brutal efficiency. He called his organization the Medellín Cartel and declared war on anyone who stood in his way. Escobar's cocaine empire made him one of the richest men in the world. At the height of his power, he was estimated to be worth over $30 billion. He lived a life of unimaginable luxury. He owned lavish estates, a private zoo, and a fleet of airplanes and helicopters. His extravagance knew no bounds. He once burned $2 million in cash to keep his daughter warm while they were on the run. He threw lavish parties attended by politicians, celebrities, and even international beauty queens. His wealth was as obscene as it was dangerous. Section 5. The Two Faces of Escobar: Robin Hood or Ruthless Criminal. While Escobar's wealth grew, so did his infamy. His empire was built on the back of the cocaine trade, which brought him immense riches, but also made him one of the most wanted men in the world. His opulent lifestyle was a stark contrast to the poverty that plagued much of Colombia. Lavish estates, private zoos, and fleets of expensive cars were just a few symbols of his immense wealth. He became known as El Patron, a figure both revered and feared. To some, he was a savior who provided for the poor and stood up against the corrupt government. To others, he was a tyrant who ruled through fear and violence. His public appearances were always heavily guarded, showcasing his power and the constant threat he faced from rivals and law enforcement. He was a ruthless killer who ordered the deaths of thousands, including politicians, journalists, and innocent civilians. His reign of terror included bombings, assassinations, and kidnappings. The Medellín Cartel, under his command, was responsible for countless atrocities that left a deep scar on Colombian society. He unleashed a wave of terror that crippled Colombia. The fear he instilled was palpable, affecting every level of society. From the bustling streets of Bogotá to the rural villages, no one was safe from the reach of Escobar's violence. His tactics were brutal, aiming to destabilize the government and maintain his grip on power. Yet, Escobar also cultivated a Robin Hood image. He strategically used his wealth to gain the loyalty and support of the poor. By funding community projects and providing direct aid, he positioned himself as a benefactor to those who had been neglected by the state. This duality made him a complex figure in the eyes of many Colombians. He spent millions building houses and soccer fields for the poor in Medellín. These acts of charity were not just about generosity, they were calculated moves to build a loyal base of supporters. The neighborhoods he helped often became his strongholds, where residents would protect him from law enforcement and rival cartels. He was seen by some as a champion of the people, a man who had risen from poverty to challenge the corrupt elite. His story resonated with many who saw him as a symbol of resistance against a system that had failed them. This narrative of the underdog who took on the powerful elite added to his mythos. This dichotomy, the Robin Hood versus the ruthless kingpin, is central to understanding the complex legacy of Pablo Escobar. His life was a blend of contradictions, making him one of the most enigmatic figures in modern history. The impact of his actions continues to be felt in Colombia and around the world as people grapple with the duality of his legacy. Section 6. The walls close in, the beginning of the end. By the late 1980s, the walls were closing in on Escobar. The Colombian government, under pressure from the United States, launched an all-out offensive against the Medellín Cartel. Escobar responded with a campaign of terror, detonating bombs in cities and assassinating anyone who dared oppose him. Despite his ruthlessness, Escobar was becoming increasingly isolated. His empire was crumbling. His closest allies were turning against him. The violence he had unleashed was spiraling out of control, even for a man accustomed to bloodshed. Section 7. Death of a Kingpin. Escobar's Last Stand. On December 2, 1993, Pablo Escobar was finally cornered. After a year-long manhunt, Colombian security forces tracked him to a middle-class neighborhood in Medellín. A shootout ensued, and Escobar was shot dead on a rooftop, his reign of terror finally over. His death was met with mixed reactions. Some celebrated the end of his reign of terror. Others mourned the loss of a man they saw as a savior. His death marked the beginning of the end for the Medellín Cartel, but the drug trade he helped create continued to flourish. Section 8. The Escobar Legacy, a complex and troubled inheritance. Pablo Escobar left behind a complex and troubled legacy. He was a man of contradictions, a ruthless killer who loved his family, a criminal mastermind who championed the poor. He was a product of his environment, a man who rose from poverty to become a symbol of both hope and terror. His story is a reminder of the devastating consequences of the drug trade, the corrosive nature of power, and the resilience of the human spirit. Even in death, Pablo Escobar continues to cast a long shadow over Colombia and the world. Section 9. Lessons Learned, the High Cost of Power. The story of Pablo Escobar offers important lessons about the allure and the dangers of power. Escobar, once a small-time criminal, rose to become one of the most powerful and feared drug lords in history. His journey from the slums of Medellín to the heights of wealth and influence is both fascinating and terrifying. It serves as a stark reminder of how power, when unchecked, can corrupt absolutely. It highlights the devastating impact of the drug trade on individuals, communities, and entire nations. The violence and chaos that Escobar's empire unleashed upon Colombia left deep scars that are still felt today. Families were torn apart, communities were ravaged, and the very fabric of society was threatened. The human cost of Escobar's ambition was immeasurable, affecting countless lives in ways that can never be fully understood. It reminds us that the pursuit of wealth and power at any cost can have tragic consequences. Escobar's opulent lifestyle, funded by the suffering of others, stands as a testament to the moral decay that can accompany the relentless pursuit of power. His story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing personal gain over the well-being of others. Escobar's life, though extraordinary in its scope and violence, provides universal insights into the human condition. His rise and fall illustrate the complexities of human nature, the allure of power, and the inevitable consequences of living a life driven by greed and ambition. His interactions with his family, his moments of vulnerability, and his ultimate downfall offer a multifaceted view of a man who was both a villain and a product of his environment. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about ambition, greed, and the choices we make in the face of adversity. Escobar's story challenges us to reflect on our own values and the lengths we might go to achieve our desires. It asks us to consider the impact of our actions on others and the legacy we wish to leave behind. Ultimately, it is a story that encourages reflection and dialogue, reminding us of the enduring power and the high cost of unchecked ambition. Escobar's legacy is a complex one, filled with lessons about the human capacity for both good and evil. It is a narrative that continues to resonate, urging us to learn from the past and strive for a future where power is wielded with responsibility and compassion.